President Cyril Ramaphosa has 12 months to work on changes to the Executive Code of Ethics after the Constitutional Court found parts of it unconstitutional and invalid. The court found that the code falls short of the constitutional and statutory requirements of transparency. It also found that there was a misalignment with the Political Funding Act because there's no disclosure of internal party donations. This is speaking to members of the executive who run for election within their organizations, their political homes, so to speak. Let's pick this up with Sandile Swana, political analyst, joining us from Johannesburg. A very good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you for your time. Just how much do you think this will change the way in which political parties, and we reference the ANC because it makes up the bulk of the executive, but how much do you think this will change those party contests?
Yes, it's already changing the landscape dramatically. If you want to talk about the ANC, you will see that in the past 2 months or so, they've issued their guidelines for the upcoming elections in December, and the full financial records will be subject to the Electoral Committee of the ANC with powers to summon records and even to lay criminal charges and to litigate in a civil way. So if you choose to be a candidate, for instance, in the ANC between now and December, you are going to open your campaign and the people around you to a lot of financial scrutiny. So this has been long in coming, but I think it is now here.
And what will have to be done, I suppose, is the distinction between an innocent, shall we say, donation to an individual's campaign versus an attempt to influence them, which may lead them into a rather tricky spot, so to speak.
Yes, I think Judge Mogoeng, Chief Justice, former Chief Justice, tried to educate us about this whole thing quite well, in fact, by saying that a lot of these so-called political funders, they put money into one campaign in order to either want policy decisions in their favor. For instance, now people are talking about the deregulation of the electricity supply industry, the introduction of IPPs, and even the privatization of Eskom. Now, if we are to look at the CVs and the profiles of the people who are campaigning for this, are they not people perhaps who put money into CR17 or behind John Steenhuisen or some other fellow who is now pursuing this line in order to reward those who funded them at an earlier date?
And that's exactly it, isn't it? It's not about explicit corruption or money for an explicitly corrupt person, so to speak, but it's about perhaps the softer ways in which money is used to determine possibly even the future of a country in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, I suppose research and investigations will still be done in the future. As an example, there was a big debate which ended unceremoniously about ARVs in South Africa. And as it ended unceremoniously with the entrance of Jacob Zuma, supported by white business, by the way, and many white commentators in South Africa against Thabo Mbeki, what then happened is that South Africa developed the largest population of HIV/AIDS infected people. So the idea of controlling the social behavior and so on fell by the wayside, and we became chemical dependent and sunk deeper into a huge financial burden of financing the Western pharmaceutical companies in South Africa. So all of those things are going on. Some comes in the form of pseudo research to inform policy. But in fact, all of that is actually changing the character of the nation.
The President, of course, has 12 months as directed by the Constitutional Court to make the amendments, so we don't know what the exact wording will be. But I wonder how much thought you've given to the possibility of proxies being used down the line to channel these funds if a person does not want to be directly linked to assisting a candidate to win an election come the next 2 or 3 conferences of the party.
Yes, for the time being, the judgment is leaving the slate blank for the for the president and his drafters and whoever else will be involved to do the drafting. But if you read the ANC document, the guidelines that the ANC has put forward, it looks like the ANC itself, because they know what they've been doing, how they've been cooking this whole thing before, is quite in-depth. The type of records that they would want disclosed by anybody who's running any campaign, and what perhaps you might even call lifestyle audits that are entailed in all of this. So it's going to be, I anticipate that the guidelines that the ANC has and the Political Party Funding Act and all those things, I think is going to be fairly tight. And
when we began this journey and the questions emerged right at the beginning when the public protector started investigating President Cyril Ramaphosa's campaigning CR17 fund based on a donation from Bosasa, it was flagged by the DA leader at the time, Musi Maimane, who asked it as a question in Parliament. What then emerged were questions around how much the president knew and when, because according to him, he wasn't directly involved in the running of that campaign. And now we have to deal with whether ignorance can still stand as an explanation for having received money from any other person that may be to buy influence or may have been from a person who themselves is of questionable character in society.
Yeah, the judges dealt with that issue. The case, in the judgment, it's written about that. So the bottom line position is that what you call proxies is actually probably designed, intentionally designed artificial ignorance. These people don't end up not knowing. They end up knowing, and they know who to reward. So that is the empirical evidence of the matter. So you cannot write the code in such a way that you assume that the candidates will be unaware of who's funding what, who's doing what. They are unaware, assume that they are aware, and then write the code accordingly.
Sandile Swana, always a pleasure to speak to you, sir. Thank you for your time.